It was a Friday night at the Golden Oak, one of the most luxurious restaurants in the city. Dim amber lights glowed against polished wooden walls, and the gentle hum of a live jazz band filled the air. The kind of place where a dinner bill could buy a week's worth of groceries for an average family. In the far corner, the maître d' whispered to the waitstaff that Mr. Jonathan Miles had arrived, one of the richest men in the state. Everyone straightened up. Jonathan wasn't the kind of man who had to announce himself. His tailored navy suit and the quiet confidence in his stride did all the talking. At his side was his 10-year-old son, Ethan, moving carefully with the help of a lightweight aluminum cane. Ethan's cerebral palsy meant his gait was uneven, but his smile, when it came, was like a burst of sunlight. Jonathan had built his fortune in tech, apps, investments, mergers, a life lived in boardrooms and private jets. But tonight, his mind wasn't on business. He was here because his son had begged for a special dinner out to celebrate a good week at therapy. The hostess led them to a table with a perfect view of the small dance floor in the center of the restaurant. It was almost empty now, but every Friday night, the jazz band would play something soft enough for couples to sway to. Jonathan ordered his usual without looking at the menu, his mind already drifting toward his phone. He had a deal closing in Europe tonight, and the temptation to check emails was strong. Ethan, meanwhile, was glued to the musicians. His small hand tapped along with the rhythm on the table. And then she appeared. The waitress assigned to their table was a young black woman, maybe in her late 20s, with an energy that seemed to warm the room. Her name tag read Danielle. She didn't just walk, she glided, balancing a tray in one hand with effortless grace. Her smile was genuine, the kind that made you feel like she was happy you existed. "Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Danielle, and I'll be taking care of you tonight," she said warmly, making eye contact with Ethan before Jonathan. "And what's your name, sweetheart?" "Ethan," the boy replied shyly. "Well, Ethan, you picked a great night to come here. The band's just getting started. You like music?" Ethan nodded quickly, his eyes lighting up. I love music. I want to dance one day." Jonathan stiffened slightly. Dance. It was a topic he usually avoided. He didn't want to crush Ethan's dreams, but in his mind, dancing was something his son would never be able to do. At least not without looking awkward. Danielle didn't miss the hesitation in Jonathan's face. She simply smiled at Ethan and whispered, "You know, I think you already can." Over the next half hour, Danielle returned with drinks, bread, and little jokes that kept Ethan giggling. She crouched down to his level, listened to him talk about school, and treated him as though he were the most important person in the room. Jonathan watched, curious. He wasn't used to seeing people give Ethan that kind of attention without pity. Halfway through the meal, the jazz band switched to a soft, slow number. The couples began to drift onto the dance floor. Ethan's eyes followed them, his fingers twitching in rhythm. And then, something unexpected happened. Danielle, carrying a tray of glasses back to the bar, passed by their table, glanced at Ethan, and without a word, set the tray down. She crouched again, smiled, and held out her hand. "Come on," she said softly. "Let's try." Jonathan almost spoke up, to politely decline to protect Ethan from embarrassment. But before he could, Ethan was already taking her hand. The boy's cane tapped gently against the polished floor as Danielle led him to the edge of the dance space. People began to notice. A few heads turned. Danielle placed one of Ethan's small hands on her hip and held his other hand gently in hers. "We're not doing anything fancy," she whispered. "Just follow my lead. One step and a tap, like this." The music flowed around them. Step, tap, step, tap. Ethan stumbled at first, his cheeks flushing with effort, but Danielle didn't let go. She smiled like he was nailing every move, and soon something magical happened. Ethan began to sway with the rhythm. His uneven steps didn't matter. He was dancing. Jonathan's throat tightened as he watched. This was his son moving to music, laughing, spinning, and the room wasn't laughing at him. In fact, a few diners began to smile, some even clapping softly in encouragement. When the song ended, Danielle knelt down to Ethan's height. "See, you danced, and you were amazing." Ethan beamed, his eyes shining with a joy Jonathan hadn't seen in years. On the way back to their table, Ethan clung to Danielle's hand. "Can we do it again sometime?" he asked. "You bet," she said, "and next time I'll teach you a twirl." Jonathan barely spoke through the rest of dinner. His mind was spinning about Danielle's kindness, about how something so simple could mean so much, about how, for all his billions, he had never given his son what that dance had. And yet, this was only the beginning, because what happened after they left the restaurant that night would change Jonathan's life forever. That night, Jonathan lay awake longer than usual. The image of his son on the dance floor replayed in his mind like a scene from a movie. Ethan's uneven but determined steps, Danielle's unwavering patience, the way the entire room seemed to root for them. He'd spent years protecting Ethan from situations where he might fail, thinking it was love. But now, he wondered if he'd really been protecting himself from the discomfort of watching his son struggle. Over the next week, Jonathan couldn't shake the thought of Danielle. Not just because of her kindness, but because she'd done something he, with all his money and resources, had never done. She'd believed in Ethan without hesitation. On Thursday evening, Jonathan decided to return to the Golden Oak. He told himself it was just to thank her properly, maybe leave a big tip. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. The restaurant was busy when he arrived. He asked the hostess for Danielle. Her smile faded slightly. "I'm sorry, sir. Danielle's not here tonight." "Day off?" Jonathan asked. The hostess hesitated. "No, she doesn't work here anymore." Jonathan felt an unexpected pang in his chest. "Do you know where she's working now?" The hostess glanced around as if making sure no one was listening, then lowered her voice. "She left suddenly. Something about needing more time for family. I'm sorry, that's all I know." Jonathan walked out into the cool evening air, unsettled. He'd been ready to hand her an envelope with enough money to make her life easier, but now she was gone, and he didn't even know how to find her. That night, Ethan brought her up at dinner. "Dad, can we go back to the restaurant, the one with the music?" Jonathan hesitated. "She's not there anymore, buddy." Ethan's smile faded. "Oh, but she said she'd teach me the twirl." Jonathan looked into his son's hopeful eyes and felt a weight settle in his chest. "I'll see what I can do." And so he began searching. It wasn't easy. He asked around the restaurant community, called a few managers he knew, even reached out on social media. Most replies came back blank. Then, nearly 3 weeks later, one of his assistants forwarded him a message. "I think the waitress you're looking for volunteers at the community center on 5th Street. The next Saturday, Jonathan and Ethan drove there. It was nothing like the Golden Oak. The paint on the building was peeling, the parking lot full of potholes. Inside, the smell of fresh baked bread mingled with the laughter of children. And there she was. Danielle was in the middle of a small group of kids, some in wheelchairs, others with walkers or braces. She was teaching them a simple dance: step, clap, turn. Her movements were slow, exaggerated, full of encouragement. The kids followed, some giggling, some concentrating with fierce determination. Ethan spotted her immediately. "Dad, it's her!" Danielle turned, her eyes widening in surprise. "Ethan, you made it!" She crossed the room, kneeling to hug him. "You ready for that twirl I promised?" Ethan nodded eagerly. Jonathan watched as she guided Ethan into the dance circle. This time, she didn't just lead him, she let him lead a few steps himself. When he stumbled, she laughed with him instead of rushing to steady him. And when he finally managed the twirl, the room erupted in applause. After the session ended, Jonathan approached her. "I came to thank you," he began. "That night at the restaurant, you gave my son something I never could." Danielle smiled gently. "You could, Mr. Miles. You just didn't know how yet." Jonathan paused. "Why did you leave the restaurant?" She glanced toward the children. "This is where I belong. My little sister was born with spina bifida. She passed away 3 years ago, but before she did, we used to dance in our kitchen every night. I guess I wanted to give other kids what she gave me. The feeling that you're more than your limitations." Jonathan felt his throat tighten. For years, he'd measured life in numbers, revenue, margins, percentages, but here was a woman measuring it in moments. On the drive home, Ethan chattered excitedly about the dance. Jonathan listened, but he was also thinking. The next week, he called Danielle with a proposal to fund her dance program so it could reach more children with disabilities. At first, she refused. "I don't want to turn this into something about money," she said. "It's not about money," Jonathan replied. "It's about impact. I have resources. You have the gift. Let's make something bigger together." Months later, the Miles Movement launched, a free weekly dance program for kids with disabilities, with Danielle as its director. Word spread quickly. Parents from all over the city brought their children. Some kids came shy and unsure, others came bursting with energy. All left a little taller in spirit. And every Friday night, without fail, Jonathan and Ethan attended. Ethan no longer needed convincing to step onto the floor. His movements were still uneven, but his confidence was steady. One evening, as Jonathan watched his son spin, not perfectly but joyfully, he felt something shift inside him. For the first time, he realized that being a father wasn't about shielding Ethan from struggle. It was about giving him the space to try, fail, and try again, with people around him who believed he could. Later that night, Jonathan thanked Danielle once more. She simply smiled and said, "Sometimes, Mr. Miles, all it takes to change a life is one dance." And in that moment, Jonathan knew she was right.